What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Go Talk with Marcus, powered by Podex, fueled by GoFuel. Joining me on the show for the very first time is Jordan of the Sports Dude Heinz Show as we break down his favorite team, the Cincinnati Bengals, and what is the 31st of 32 episodes in the NFL offseason series here. What's up, Jordan? Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me and everything. I'm excited to talk about the Bengals. I'm really excited to be on here today.
I appreciate you for coming on. I know you're a big Bengals fan. Let's jump right into it. For those of you guys that follow, you guys know that I adopted the Cincinnati Bengals as my second team last season during the playoff push because Joe Burrow is just so good at the game of football, and as is Jamar Chase, and they really took the lead by storm. Of course, making it all the way to the Super Bowl, and no one really thought they were going to do that. And of course, that is because of Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow entering this season. Jordan, where do you have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow ranked amongst the top quarterback to wide receiver duos in the NFL today?
Well, it's really interesting because, if we're talking about, 4 or 5 months ago, where we have, Burrow and Jamar Chase, I would probably have them at 3. I would have had them, behind Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. But obviously, since we saw that trade, that's blown out of the water. To me, I always try to be realistic when it comes to the Bengals. To me, I would probably put them maybe number 2. I would probably have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs number 1, but Burrow and Chase, to me, without a doubt, are at least top 2. I would probably have number 2 with Burrow and Chase. I mean, this was the first year with them. I cannot imagine the years to come between one of the best, quarterback and wide receiver duos in the NFL.
I agree. I think they're one of the best. I think it's interchangeable, whether it's Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, whether it's Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford, or whether it's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Those are definitely the 3 premier duos in the NFL. Then, of course, they're also up there with, Tom Brady and Mike Evans, and some of the other, ones like that. They're so talented, and they're really young. And that's what I think is what's the most intriguing about the future for the Bengals with these two is Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are both under 25, right? And they've got a lot of years ahead. Joe Burrow just stepped back on the practice field for training camp for the first time since his appendectomy last month. He had a big season last season. Do you expect Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, well, more so Joe Burrow, to continue to lead this team and be right back in the thick of things when when come playoff time, we're talking about who's making a push for the Super Bowl? Or do you think that maybe there could be a slight hangover from the Super Bowl?
I think a hangover is possible when it comes to maybe their record, the Bengals record, but when it comes to Burrow's production, I don't really see that happening. Because when you look at Joe Burrow last season, I mean, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and I was just thinking the other day, it still makes no sense to me how he did not receive an MVP vote last season. He was one of a top 5 quarterback last year, led him to the Super Bowl in his first full season. But you also have to look at he was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL last year, and I think that's something people don't really talk about enough. They talk about the offensive line play, how bad it was, but I mean, to be the most sacked quarterback in the NFL, to take a team to the Super Bowl who had no expectations for, and now you bring in 3 new offensive linemen. To me, I think that's going to elevate and help Burrow's play even more. And I'm super, super excited to see Burrow play this season because I think he's going to play even better this year than compared to last year.
I do agree with you. I personally do think that Joe Burrow is firmly in the discussion to be in the top 6 of quarterbacks in the NFL. It depends on preference between him and Justin Herbert. I think you can kind of put them as like a 4A, 4B kind of situation. When you look at obviously the AFC specifically, right? Because AFC is stacked with young quarterbacks. You got Lamar Jackson, you got Josh Allen, you got Justin Herbert. Obviously, you have Patrick Mahomes, Burrow, of course, and a lot of other young guys coming up like Mac Jones and Tua and all these guys. Are you confident in Joe Burrow's leadership ability as it pertains to being able to weather the storm for years to come? Because none of these guys are going anywhere anytime soon, unless maybe the Ravens don't get things sorted out with Lamar. But for the most part, these guys are set in stone at least for the next 10 to 12 years where they're at. Are you at all confident, or where is your confidence as far as Joe Burrow's ability to lead this team so that the Super Bowl doesn't become a flash in the pan thing, but like you can expect where the Bengals become a team that you can expect to be right in the thick of things, vying for Super Bowls and championships for the next 5, 7, 10 years?
Well, I can fully expect it. As long as Joe Burrow is our quarterback, I expect us to be playoff contenders. I mean, when you look at, last season, like I mentioned, we had no expectations. Everybody had us last in the AFC North for the most part. And then we win, 10 games, win a division. We win 3 playoff games. We did not win a playoff game in over 30 years. We won our first road playoff game in franchise history. And that just kind of shows Burrow's development, which is insane because when you look at Burrow, Bengal fans, we were so excited to draft Burrow, and we knew he was going to be great for us. But as crazy as it sounds, we knew he was going to be phenomenal. He's ahead of schedule in a way. And the fact that, his season-ending surgery, he comes back, plays better, plays far better than we thought he possibly could. As long as you have Burrow as the Bengals quarterback, I think we have a chance of being Super Bowl contenders, no matter who the other quarterbacks are in the AFC.
I do think one of the big steps towards making sure that the Bengals stay quarterback or stay Super Bowl contenders is making sure that they improve where they need to improve, right? And they did a major job of that this offseason with focusing on the offensive line, right? This was not the best offensive line unit. You mentioned Joe Burrow led the league in sacks last season, got sacked 9 times in that division round game down in Tennessee, but yet they still found themselves in the Super Bowl. With this offensive line group now being improved, and they spent a lot of money on offensive line in free agency, and they drafted some offensive linemen as well. Do you think that increases the Bengals' odds of making it back to the Super Bowl this season now that they have focused on their needs?
Absolutely, because when you look at the Bengals, this past season, even going to Super Bowl, you knew that was just their, one weakness. You have the most sacks given up, by a quarterback, and you're still able to make the Super Bowl. You just know if you have a slightly better offensive line, you could have won the Super Bowl. And the fact that you have, 3 new guys, when you look at the guys they're replacing, those players were absolutely horrible. And, some of those guys are still on the team right now, and they played the preseason the other day, and they played worse than we've ever seen. And when you bring in guys like Leo Collins, Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, guys who have, been with winning cultures, Leo Collins is one of the best tackles in the league. There's no reason not to believe that Burrow is capable of taking this team to the Super Bowl again. If he done it by getting it sacked 50 times, he can do it again with one of the best right tackles in the league and a very, very, very much improved offensive line, which I think is, I know people like to talk about, it's improved, but it's way better than people think compared to last season.
That is true. So we go from the offensive line now to the defense. I think the big thing concerning this team overall is what's going on with Jesse Bates. What is going on with Jesse Bates and the contract negotiations and things between himself and the Cincinnati Bengals? And are you confident that come week 1, Jesse Bates will be stepping onto the field for your Bengals?
I am confident when you look at it. He was at the game the other day. He was sitting in, one of the box seats instead of, sitting with the teammates on the field. To me, I felt like that was kind of a slap in the face to the Bengals. I know that's, a debatable topic, but, he was practicing the other day. He had a Bengals helmet on. He's really close to this team. I would be shocked if he does hold out. When you look at players in the past, there's really you don't really have an advantage of holding out because look at a guy like Le'Veon Bell. He was one of the last guys to hold out. Look what he's now boxing. It's crazy. How much can change. Jesse Bates, this past season was a major letdown performance. Heading into last offseason, I was really hoping we could extend him before his price got too high. Because when you look at guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, getting a ton of money, I don't put Bates in that category with Minkah Fitzpatrick, but I think Bates is going to get somewhat close to that. But ultimately, I do think Bates will end up playing week 1. I would be absolutely shocked if he doesn't. I think not only will it hurt the team, but it will really hurt him in the long run as well.
This is a really good defense. This is a good defense last season, especially in the back half. I think it was really underrated. You look at not just what J.C. Bates was doing, but also what Trey Flowers and Eric Hendrickson and all the other guys they brought in via free agency to kind of help with this defense. Another big reason why they were to get to the Super Bowl last season without the offensive line being up to par. My one minor concern with Jesse Bates' contract situation is, because you're right, there is no advantage to holding out. But if Jesse Bates were to steadfast and hold out, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy to do that. But if he were to do that, I don't think that is a good thing for the defense moving forward. I don't think that's a good thing for the team moving forward in general. But especially when you've got one of your defensive leaders, one of the best players on your defense not present, that does make it difficult because when you look at this schedule, right, not a lot of people like to make a lot of things about the schedule, but this is a first-place schedule. And this is the first time in a very long time that the Cincinnati Bengals have been playing a first-place schedule. There are a lot of tough opponents sprinkled in throughout this roster or in throughout the schedule, not to mention Lamar Jackson being healthy makes the Ravens a tougher opponent than they were last season, at least that second half anyway. if for some reason the Browns can kind of stay afloat, right? Even whether it's Jacoby Brissett or whether they bring in Jimmy G, they're still going to be a tough out because of the defense and because of the offensive weapons they do have around the quarterback. No matter, even though we don't know who that quarterback is, right? I think there's a game on there against Buffalo, right? There's a couple other games against Dallas and some, like, there are a lot of really, really, really good teams on this schedule for Cincinnati this season. That defense has to be top notch because, as we talked about earlier, this AFC is loaded, especially offensively. So let's say Jesse Bates does hold down and we don't see Jesse Bates step foot on the field, but I think you and I both agree that's probably not going to happen. Does that give you any pause for concern as far as how far this team can go if the defense can't keep up with some of these other loaded offenses like Buffalo and like Los Angeles and some of these other crazy good offenses we've got in the AFC?
I don't think it's going to really hurt our production a lot. Like, I'm still going to have faith that this Bengals team is 100% a Super Bowl contender. I mean, if you don't have Bates in this team, it's going to hurt our defense a little bit. But it's really interesting because when you look at, Bates's, contract, he wants to be paid as a top 5 safety in the NFL. You go back and watch last season. Bates was good, but he was nowhere near as good as people expected him to be. You go back and watch last season, you can make a legitimate case. Jesse Bates was not even a top 5 defensive player for the Bengals last season. Like, that's where he stood when you look at guys like Trey Hendrickson, who went freaking off last season. Trey Hendrickson only has half a sack less than Myles Garrett the last 2 seasons. Sam Hubbard had a career year. Logan Wilson had a phenomenal year. BJ Hill, Larry Ogunjobi, Chidobe Awuzie, all those guys who can make a case, were better than Jesse Bates last season. Would it hurt the Bengals to not have Bates? Yes. But if you're looking at it like last season, if Jesse Bates didn't play last year, I'll be much more concerned because, during the 2020 season, Jesse Bates was the best safety in the league. And there's really not much debate for that. Yeah. But now with his decline of play, I'm not worried as much because I know some of these other guys can step up. When you have Von Bell, who's a reliable safety, and you bring in Daxton Hill, our first round pick. So I still think we're capable, of being Super Bowl contenders and be really good if we don't have Jesse Bates.
Let's talk about the guy that I think surprised a lot more people than anyone expected. Right, that's not Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow. That's not anyone on the defense. That's Zach Taylor, who in his second season coached a team that was called the Cincinnati Bengals all the way to the Super Bowl. Right, Zach Taylor, where does he rank among coaches in the AFC specifically? Because there are a lot of good coaches in the AFC. Do you think Zach Taylor? I know this is what his third season now. He's entering his third season now as head coach, right?
His fourth season.
Say it again.
His fourth season.
His fourth season, right? He just wrapped up his third. That's right. So entering now what is his fourth season, do you think Zach Taylor can still hold his own against some of the better offensive or the better head coaches in the AFC today when you talk about your Mike Tomlins and your Sean McDermott's and guys like that?
I think he can. It's just the consistency of doing it. The first 2 seasons, I was a big supporter of firing Zach Taylor. The first 2 seasons, he really showed no promise whatsoever of this Bengals team having a bright future until that Monday night game, victory against the Steelers. But, since then, this Bengals team has been completely different. Taylor, to me, I really don't know. I think a little bit has to do with Joe Burrow's, amazing play. Some of it has to do with Zach Taylor to a degree. But, I mean, if you're comparing Bill Belichick, McDermott, Mike Tomlin, I'm taking all those guys ahead of Zach Taylor confidently because I think Zach Taylor is capable, but he has to do it consistently. When you look at, Zach Taylor, the Bengals, swept the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Chiefs last season. It's still crazy to say. But you go back, they did lose to the Bears. They did lose to the Jets. You go back and watch those games. Those were some really, really, really bad bad games, play calling by Zach Taylor. He needs to be more consistent, and if he can be more consistent, I mean that's even more hope and great for the Bengal fans and for the future. Because if he can be more consistent with this new improved team, we just come off Super Bowl. I mean, there's even more to look forward to being a Bengal fan.
So let's run down the Bengals schedule. Right, I alluded to it earlier. Let's just run down for those at home who don't know the Bengals schedule. You start Week 1 versus Pittsburgh. You go to Dallas Week 2. Go to New York to face the Jets Week 3, host the Dolphins, visit the Ravens, visit the Saints, host the Falcons, visit the Browns, host the Panthers. Then you have your bye. Coming out of the bye in Week 10, you go to Week 11, 2-game road trip to Pittsburgh and Tennessee. You host Kansas City and Cleveland in a back-to-back at home. You go on the road to take on the Bucs and the Patriots before finishing the season out at home against the Bills Week 17 and the Ravens Week 18. So like I said, this is a loaded schedule, one of the tougher schedules in the NFL, not just AFC, but in the NFL. How many wins do you see your Cincinnati Bengals racking up when it's all said and done this season?
This is very interesting because I was just talking to somebody the other day. When you look at the Bengals last season, people don't really talk about it a lot, but the Pittsburgh Steelers were only half a game from winning the AFC North last season. The Bengals did not win the AFC North by much at all last year.
Yeah.
You go back and look at how many different games the Bengals won in the last play of the game. Minnesota week 1, the Chiefs, in the regular season and in the postseason. I mean, they've had multiple games where they just won by, the final plays of the game. And I believe they had, 5 game winning kicks this season. Could have been 6 of that we would have beat the Green Bay Packers. The Bengals are a team who have not had much luck and success when it comes to one possession games in the past. Yeah. Realistically, when it comes to that, I don't think we're going to be as lucky as getting one of those, game-winning field goals as time expires. Because when you look at last season's schedule compared to this season's schedule, it is so much harder. And to me, this division is tough. I cannot stand the Browns, Steelers, or Ravens, but I'm going to acknowledge, those teams, you can't take them lightly. For whatever reason, the past couple of years, the Bengals have not been able to beat the Browns. It makes zero sense at all. When Baker Mayfield plays against Cincinnati, he turns into freaking Joe Montana. It makes zero sense. And when you look at the Bengals now, with our improved offensive line, yes, we have improved offensive line. We had a really nice offseason, but when you look at the Baltimore Ravens, they had a freaking amazing draft. I would say arguably the best draft in the NFL. The Steelers are the Steelers. They're always going to be good. The Browns, they're really kind of up in the air right now because we don't know what's going to happen with Watson. But to me, last season, like I said, we were 10-7. I want to say we're going to be 11-6. We're going to probably be 4-2 in a division. We might lose one. To the let's see here. I think we're going to have a couple games that we shouldn't lose to. It seems like for whatever reason the Bengals always have at least 1 or 2 games a year they absolutely should not lose. Like I mentioned earlier, we swept the Chiefs, Ravens, and Steelers. We lost to the Jets and Bears. It makes no sense at all. But ultimately, I think we're going to be 11-6. I think we're going to win a division. But it should be really, really tough because year in and year out, the AFC North is one of the most toughest divisions in the NFL, and it's going to prove once again this year why it's one of the hardest ones. But 11-6, I think the Bengals won a division, and I'm really, really excited about this upcoming year.
I have been on record as saying that I think the Bengals are going to win the AFC North by a landslide. I stand by that. They are the only team in the division that got better. Like the Steelers are roughly the same, but their offensive line still is not that great, and they don't really know what's going on at quarterback, although I think we can safely assume that it'll probably be Kenny Pickett starting come week 1, even though I think it should be Mitch Trubisky, right? Look at the Browns. They added weapons offensively, but then they paid Deshaun Watson all this money, but we don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. If Deshaun Watson's not on the field, I don't think this team this season is going to be better than what it was last season, if at all the same, right? The Ravens, Lamar is going to be healthy. Great. That does account for something. But as everyone likes to mention, they don't really have an offensive line, and there's not a lot of weapons offensively outside of Mark Andrews, J.K. Dobbins, so there's no receivers, basically, is what everyone is harping on. And that's fair, but the defense is really good. But this is the only team in the division that, one, got better, but more importantly, looked at what they needed and got better there. So with that being said, I do think the Bengals can win this division by a landslide. Because to your point, you're right. Even though this is a tougher schedule, even though they barely won the division last season, I do think though that this is the team that, number one, understands that they're here. Like this Bengals team is here. This was not, you can say, oh, well, I might not have gone that far if Lamar wasn't hurt or all this other stuff. But the fact of the matter is, the Bengals are here and they're not going anywhere, as you said earlier, right? Have the Bengals winning 13 games this season, unofficially, but I always throw in one game that they'll lose. They have no business losing. So really, that's a 12-5 record, which I think is more than enough to lock up the AFC North. I think that'll put them. They could be vying for the second seed in the AFC this season. I think it'll be a tough race between them, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, because depending on what happens there. But I think the Bengals are going to be really good. I think they're going to prove that this was not last season wasn't just a fluke, but they are actually that good. I think the front office did a fantastic job of addressing needs because no one really expected the Bengals to do that. It was like, oh, it's the Bengals. They're going to mess it up. But they didn't. They said, we've got some here. We got to make sure we protect our asset and protect our investments. And they did just that in the offseason. So I am super high on the Bengals. As most of you guys that follow the show know that Joseph Lee Burrow is one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. And I have no problem saying his full name. So it is what it is. let's talk really quickly because we just went the record we both have them in the playoffs. If you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it is that the Bengals make it back to the Super Bowl this season on a scale of 1 to 10?
I mean, that's really tough. I mean, when you look at some of these teams, I mean, you look at the Chargers, last season. They didn't have to face the Chargers in the postseason because the Chargers didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
But when you look at the Chargers last year, they humiliated the Bengals. They beat them by like 19 points. And now you look at the Chargers, how much better they are last season. I mean, bringing in J.C. Jackson, bringing in, Khalil Mack, all these guys. Look at a team like the Raiders. I mentioned those teams in the regular season the Bengals beat as last play of the game. The Bengals basically beat the Raiders the last play of the game. It was an interception by Jermaine Pratt. The rest of the plays were kneel downs. If they don't get the interception, who's to say the Raiders maybe win that game? But I really don't know. When you look at, I would say take all the AFC West, put in the Bills and the Bengals. Those are the Super Bowl contenders to me. Out of 10, I would say, this is tough. I would probably say a 5. I try to be confident, but I try to be realistic as well because the Raiders, I mean, they had a very underrated offseason. I mean, they also got Chandler Jones. I don't think people talk about that enough because everybody likes to talk about, Devontae Adams. Chandler Jones is one of the best edge rushers in this, past decade. Possibly could be a Hall of Famer. When you look at the Broncos, they had a tremendous offseason. The Chiefs are always going to be great. Like I said, the Chargers, the Bills, I think they're going to be really good as well. But, I mean, it's one of those deals like I fully expect the Bengals to win the division. But if there's a scenario like they don't win a division, to me, I'm much more concerned because I don't feel really that comfortable if I'm the Bengals playing at some of these places like the Chiefs and some of these other places. I know we won there in the postseason. I know we're capable of doing it. But, I mean, it's, it's really hard to do.
Sure.
But I would say probably 5 out of 10. I feel comfortable with the Bengals being in the Super Bowl this upcoming season.
I think, I'm gonna have my full list of tiers as the season gets closer. I do think though that the Bengals are a tier 1 football team, and I do think that the Bengals are one of 3 teams now, not 4, because there's a little bit concern about the Bucs, and I know it's Tom Brady, but look. He's lost 2 of he's lost 2 guards from last season that were both Pro Bowlers, and he's just lost Ryan Jensen likely for the season. So Brady likes to make sure that his middle is protected because he likes to climb the pocket. He's one of very few quarterbacks in the league today that climbs the pocket instead of rolls out to the left or the right. So that's massive. But right now, the Bengals are one of 3 teams right now that I think are contenders in the Super Bowl, and that's the Bills, who I think will be the best team in football this season, the Bengals, and then the team that they lost to in the Super Bowl last season, the Los Angeles Rams. That's really it. Now, as far as making it back to the Super Bowl, I do acknowledge it will be a bit tougher because the conference is a bit tougher. I'm a very select, and I might be the only person in America that thinks this, but maybe not. I am in a very select group of people that think that in the AFC specifically, once you get past the Bills and the Bengals and the Chargers, I do think every other team in the AFC, as far as their chances of making it to the Super Bowl, is a little bit questionable, right? I know that sounds crazy because I've included the Chiefs in that group, and they have Patrick Mahomes, and they've hosted 4 of the last AFC Championship games, right? But we have to see what that wide receiver room looks like, of course. And the thing that no one's talking about is Tyrann Mathieu was their best defensive player last season, and for much of their entire, reign of terror of the AFC, and he's not there anymore. And that defense wasn't that great with him. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be any better without him. So that's a really big point. I understand the love for the Broncos and I understand the love for the Raiders. I have more faith in the Raiders than I do the Broncos, just because the Broncos did a lot of overhauling in their coaching staff, and that comes with a lot of growing pains, especially as the season continues. Right? I say that to say I am right there with you, though. I do think it's a 50-50 shot. I do think though that the road, I know that the road to the Super Bowl in the AFC is going to have to go through Buffalo. And while I am confident the Bengals can go on the road and some of these other places and get the job done, I don't know if the Bengals can go to Buffalo and beat Buffalo. I think they'd have a better chance if Buffalo comes to Cincinnati. In order for that to happen, though, Cincinnati would have to have the number one seed in AFC, and I don't think that's going to happen. So that would be my one hesitation as far as, and of course, just any given Sunday and the regular going-ons of the NFL. So I'm going to give them a 5 right there with you because any given Sunday. But I do think, though, that the Bengals will be the second best team in the AFC this season and a top 5 team when it's all said and done across the entire NFL because they're just that good. And they're all young, right? Like all of their most important players on the right side of I usually say the right side of 30. They're on the right side of 27, which is really good. They're all going to hit their prime at right around the same time, which is what you want to see. It's going to get a little bit hectic when it comes to the salary cap gymnastics as far as making sure that they all stay together. But until we cross that bridge, all of these guys, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase, obviously, and Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon, all of these guys are going to be really, 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 really good for a very, very, very long time. There's one more thing I want to talk about that I just thought of. C.J. Uzomah left Cincinnati to go play for the Jets, and he was a big part of that offense and how it worked, especially in the back half of the season. Do you think that the loss of C.J. Uzomah will be felt in any way, if at all, for this offense moving forward now that he's not there?
This is interesting because I was just talking about this yesterday. I feel like it will be felt, but not on the field. I think it'll be more of a leadership. When you look at C.J. Uzomah, he's been with Cincinnati for quite some time. And to me, I don't think he was ever like a really good tight end. He was more of a leadership type of guy, but a locker room guy. But to me, I was really surprised that he left. But when it comes to like on the field play, I don't think you're going to really see the absence felt, not play as good, because I think Hayden Hurst is going to be able to come right in right away, play pretty much as good as Uzomah, did last season.
Sure. Well, I did just want to throw that out there because I thought that was, I think of all the moves this offseason, probably the most surprising to see C.J. Uzomah leave since I had to go to the Jets. So with that being said, Jordan, thank you for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you on and talking to you as a Bengals fan. You're the only Bengals fan I know. So, well, at least you're only Bengals fan. No, yeah, you're the only Bengals fan I know. So it was a pleasure to have you on the show and talk some Bengals football with you. Hopefully this won't be the last time you're on the show. Before you go, though, please let everybody know where they can find you and the Sports Dude Heinz Show and all your content.
Yeah, you can find the Sports Dude Heinz Show on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe there. I'd really appreciate it. I have lots of different content coming out, trying to cram everything in there in the next couple of weeks before the season starts. You can follow me on Instagram, the Sports Dude Heinz Show, and on Twitter as well as the S Dude Heinz Show. And that's where you can follow me on social media.
Again, I've talked to Jordan a couple times over Instagram about some ball, so it's nice to finally have him on and talk about some ball on the camera. So thank you again for hopping on the show. Thank you guys for watching and or listening wherever you are. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Follow on all the socials below at GTP Marcus on everything, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. And you can actually find me also on Facebook now. You can either search up my name, Dwayne Marcus, or you can search up the name of the show, Go Talk with Marcus. And you'll find me on Facebook as well. That's for all you OGs out there that don't use a Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok and much rather swipe on Facebook. That's fine. So, we are on the road to 150 subscribers. Hopefully, we're trying to get there by the end of the year. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. And also, episode 200 will be September 8th. We're going to go live at 6 o'clock, just a couple hours before kickoff of Thursday Night Football on September 8th. So be there for that. It'll be live on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So please look out for that. Set reminders and also be there for that. It's going to be a really good show. We're going to do our final season predictions and things like that and gear up for Thursday Night Football as the Bills go to Los Angeles to take on the Rams on ring night for the Rams. So once again, for Jordan of the Sports Dude Heinz Show, this is Marcus of Go Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe and then enjoy the rest of your lives.